Hello and welcome to Where is the Church Prison Edition episode 2. Today we have speaking with us is Antoinette Hancel, who has spent 30 years working with disadvantaged young people and adults who needed support, who needed help and who needed mentoring. This was a fantastic interview and I'm sure you'll enjoy it just as much as I did. Here we go. Hello, Antoinette. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I wonder if you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself, give us a little bit of an introduction, who you are, what you do, just so we can get a good understanding of your context.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Max. I come from a background of working with disaffected young people. So I started my career after university in the Probation Service. So that meant I worked mainly with adult offenders, male adult offenders, spending my time helping them to rehabilitate in the community after they've committed an offence, or preparing pre-sentence reports for them prior to going to court to inform what sentence they would receive. I also worked in the Youth Justice Service, so that was specifically with youth offenders, and I spent some years doing that until I worked up to senior management. So I managed several youth offending teams in the London area, and that was challenging, but I learned quite a lot. I've also qualified as a trained secondary school teacher, and I spent time teaching children about citizenship, about personal development for a few years. I more recently worked as the head of safeguarding and inclusion at a special educational needs school. So my entire career has been more or less centered around children and young people that are experiencing some form of difficulty, particularly young offenders who are seen, very much as outcasts. So that's been essentially what I've spent most of the time doing, tapping in and out at times as a social worker, working with children and young families as well. So spending the time working with parents who are having difficulties with their children or teenage children. So that's essentially what I've done for almost going towards 30 years now.
Wow, 30 years.
Yes.
That's a very very focused path that you've taken. Like, as you said, your whole career revolves around children and young adults going through the disaffected circumstances of life, I presume.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What's also interesting about you, what you said, is that you started off by, out of uni, you went into the probation work, but then you trained to be a teacher. Now, while some may connect the dots between helping young people and of course the prevention for probation, you've actually gone as far to say I needed to train. It says to me that definitely there is some sort of passion in this area. Let's walk back a little bit and try and unpick that, if we can. What drove your passion with this area?
I think I would say that I was brought up in a Christian home. All of my life, I was exposed to Christianity, to church. There's the essential feeling of wanting to do something, to make a difference, to touch another life, the whole idea of social justice and making that difference that you're called to make as a Christian. Also, at the time when I was born and growing up in school, I was among, that population of Black females that we were considered uneducable. not expecting much of us, the expectation that was you probably get pregnant, you probably go down that path, and end up, being in some sort of low-level occupation. But I had God in my heart and God in my soul, and I knew that there was better for me, and I knew that I could achieve more. And even, in those days when you explained to the career teacher that you wanted to go to uni, I personally was told you might not be university material. But because, again, I had God in my soul, that made me even more determined. That was the catalyst that probably got me to my first degree. And studying sociology and understanding the kind of structural inequalities that were around me at the time, I knew that I wanted to do something for somebody else to break those barriers. I think studying sociology for me helped me to understand that I wasn't imagining racism. I wasn't imagining, that things were set against me. I was set up to fail. There's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And all of those things together, I think, culminated in giving me the strength and the courage to pursue what I thought I could do. And in that, I thought, if I do something for myself, I know I'll be able to do something for someone else. And that was very much what drove me. I wanted to make a difference for someone else also.
So it's recognizing the struggles that you yourself faced in life,
Absolutely.
The structures that existed, and saying not that you've now made it, but also recognizing that there will be others coming up behind you that will face the exact same situation. And you made a decision to say, I'm not just going to look out for myself, but I'm actually going to help other people come up and recognize something better for their lives than what the stereotypes, the structures may tell them to be. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was very much God, because you do these psychometric and personality tests at school. Mine always came out that I'll be working in an office by myself, doing some sort of number exercise or numbers career, or a career that involved, very much working alone in isolation. And so I know that how that happened, I can't explain, but I know it was God, because I would never personally have chosen to work in an area that puts me in the realm of so many people. I can recall right back from primary school doing those tests and assuming I would end up in a corner on my own, working by myself. But God had a different plan, definitely.
Yeah, and sometimes it's very easy to dismiss the presence of God in the way he moves our lives, and say it's luck and chance. But you're pretty clear on this. Structures have told you that you should be one way. Career guidance counselors told you should be one way. Psychometric tests told you should be one way. But because you knew God, you decided to do something else, something that he may have had, and that could only be God. With everything else telling you what you should be, you decided something else. And I think that's amazing to recognize that also. So let's look at university. After that, you made a choice to go into probation work. What was that like? Did you have an idea when you got in there what to expect? Did it meet expectations? What was it?
What was that like? I was a very young very early 20s-year-old, not having much life experience. And I can remember one of my very first clients, I rang up. She screamed down the phone at me, and I remember calling her back, and she said to me, I'm not talking to a young girl. I'm not going to talk to a young girl about my problems. You don't understand me. And that was quite something. It made me step back and think about how I would be able to approach things and come across as mature and come across as somebody that could work in that capacity. So that was my first kind of reality check, that actually what this woman is saying has some truth in it. And how am I going to be able to meet the needs of people that are likely to be older than me? So that did send me back to the drawing board a bit about, how I was going to match my life experience with theirs, which in some cases was very different and in some cases quite similar. I think I took it for granted that people wanted to change, and that was another kind of reality check. The assumption I made was that these people are experiencing difficulties and they automatically want to change their lifestyle. But in fact, that wasn't necessarily the case. Some people had found themselves using their creativity to produce quite lucrative results, and they didn't want to make that change. So that was an eye-opener.
That is very interesting. So I wonder then, what you said you went back to the drawing board. What did you come back with then?
I think I probably spent more time reading around people's situations, circumstances, trying to understand various different types of offenders, whether there are patterns, how the home environment, how the society, the circumstances, and actually acknowledging with clients that, yes, you're right, but tell me about your story, tell me about your life, educate me. I spent a lot of time listening to them and communicating to them that I could learn lots from them as well. And that helped considerably by just being willing to listen and let them tell their stories, which a lot of them, especially female offenders, really appreciated. They wanted to open up, they wanted to tell you. Often that was the first time that they had the opportunity to really express themselves, to tell you what happened in their childhood, their experiences of their own parenting. So, in fact, they were quite willing to open up and share.
That's pretty amazing. What would you say is the difference between females and males who are going through that process? Because you've mentioned quite rightly that there is a specific struggle, especially amongst Black females, that they do go through.
Often for women, their offences are committed often to serve a need, and that need can be to finance things their children want. Lots of female offenders have been sexually abused. The stealing or the crime is very much about managing that need. The deception, the old act of deception is very much about containing that abuse, that shame that's happened. So that's very much a difference. Female offenders, often their crimes are crimes of passion, they're crimes of helping somebody else, they're crimes where they're supporting a partner, or they've in fact suffered abuse themselves. Male offenders, their offending can be very much more about violence, about respect or the lack of respect, about their ego, about wanting to have the things that they see other people have. It can be very much about status for men. Also, there's a lot of creativity as well, unused creativity that's people are wrestling with. Male offenders can have a lot of creativity. You will find a lot of male offenders maybe involved in music, in rap, in all of those sorts of things. And there's a wrestling going on about how to find a legitimate way to express that creativity. But often because of their race or their class, they don't have the networks or the connections to be able to express the kind of creativity that they have, because it's different from the standard, I want to be an accountant or I want to be a doctor. It's different, but it's there and it's powerful. And they want a way to do that and to get all of the things that other people have got, you know, like a car, a house, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And as you was mentioning that, it took me all the way back to my studies in law, and I
Right.
remember us discussing a case in particular around the topic of provocation. Because there was a lot of discussion that the defense of provocation was slanted more to males because
Yes.
of the tests that were put in place. For example, if you wanted to claim provocation, you had to have responded immediately. But this is not generally how women who've suffered emotional abuse operate. They wait.
Absolutely.
So even then you see how the structures are quite different for male and females.
That's right. And how the law discriminates against women, because you're right, provocation is a good example where women think and wait, and it tends to have, there's a delayed response, and that delayed response is looked at less favorably. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So let's fast forward a little bit, and you decided then that you were going to maybe have a slight change in career. You retrained as a teacher. You went to teach in that field. What made you make the decision? What were some of the drivers that said, right, I'm going to go into the teaching area because that's where I'm needed most at this point in time?
Yeah, it was very much a God-given direction again, but also because I wanted to see if you capture young people early from the aspect of school, what impact you can have on preventing them from offending. So, for example, when I did my master's, the area of study I looked at was the impact of school exclusions on young people's propensity to criminality. And there is a significant correlation that young people who are out of education can quickly find themselves in antisocial behavioral acts, whether it be crime or hanging around the shopping mall longer than they should, etc. And so my intention in that was to look at whether, in teaching the classroom, in giving them the kind of information that my subject area would give them, could that make a difference? Could it make a difference if young people could understand how to legitimately challenge things that they're unhappy about? Could they understand the law? Could they understand how to write to their MPs and invoke all those political structures to their advantage, and would that make a difference? So that was very much where I wanted to see education, personal development, and understanding of how society works could make an inroad on that area, whether it could have an impact on crime reduction. Yeah, so that's the reason I probably got into that.
Sure. And what would you say the results of that exploration? What were they?
I think I'd say the jury's still out on that one. Education is definitely powerful, and it definitely makes a difference if young people understand things. So, for example, I teach a lesson on sexually transmitted diseases, and when children have that kind of information, they're really, although they're scared, they're empowered, and there are conversations that they can have with me in class that they can't have with their parents, but that can make a difference. So certainly, all of those things can make a difference, but it takes time, and it's within the context of all the other things that are going on for them at school. So some of those areas where young people need education, because often the children will feed back to me and say, why isn't everyone taught this? Why didn't we know this before? And it's because, as you know, from being younger than me and going to school, the curriculum is more than full. It's bursting at the seams. And what choices do you make? What lessons are more important than others? And there's an assumption that you need the sciences and you need this. But I can tell you from my kind of work, understanding how society works is absolutely critical to a young person who is becoming frustrated and disaffected and does not know the right way to take up their issue. So, that's very much an important aspect. And those are some of the areas where I feel the church could very much pick up on and plug that gap.
You've segued nicely into my next area, which was to talk about the church and their involvement, because you're absolutely right. I think if I reflect on especially my secondary school years, I didn't really take it seriously. All I wanted to do was play football, and most people may have focused on that part. But what they may not have realized, and even myself, I didn't have the language to communicate what I was feeling, was that there was a sense of helplessness. So there's no point me trying. Why am I going to let someone else tell me that how bad I am at stuff?
Absolutely.
Let me just not do it and do my own thing anyway. And what may help with that, now that I'm later in life, is I would call it context. The whole idea of how society operates, some of the hidden forces that we may not realize working, may have provided a better understanding. Now, what I do appreciate is that within my local church, there were members within the church that I really appreciate, as they may not have seen themselves that way, but I saw them as role models. They were people who were very successful in careers, who had an understanding of systems that I didn't have, and who would be extremely supportive. So I was wondering, in terms of the local church area, what role, if you could expand on that, do you think that they could provide in helping young people?
When you think about church and you think about your own congregation, you will be able to consider and reflect and notice the amount of skills and talents and gifts that people in that church possess. Apart from that, there'll be a range of occupations, and sometimes the musician, although their job is to probably work in something very different, they are very skilled at playing the piano. They are very skilled at organizing the choir, and I've seen it myself, how talented people are, even if they don't have the educational qualifications. So church on a continuum has got everyone in there with a range of skills that can provide lots of things to young people. So sometimes it's as simple as a nice lunch. Church has got some great cooks. I know I've sampled the food. And sometimes we're thinking on, much larger, much complicated aspects of providing for troubled children or the kinds of poorer or powerless people in our community, but it doesn't always have to be something complicated and complex. Lots of people can get together over a good meal. I think what the barriers are is that church has very much a fortress mentality, and it's very much about how the church should operate and sticking to the original boundaries. And this is how it has been, and it always should be. We know, and I know especially, that young people have changed. They're very different from when I was a young child. When I was a young child, adults ruled, your parents ruled, all the parents ruled. And what they say, we live in a completely different area. Most parents now are trying to catch up with their children's knowledge. The technology that we're faced with, lots of parents have barely come to grips with one aspect of technology before it shifts and moves, and your children are always ahead of you. And young people, whether they're offenders or they're disaffected, let me tell you, when it comes to technology, very few of them are behind. And the way in which we communicate has to be different. We might need to be more involved in social media. We might need to be more involved in the way we organise our services. So for all the years I've grown up, the morning services very much starts at the same time, it's set in the same way, and nothing has changed dramatically. And if we're going to reach out to young people in particular, we have to think differently. We have to have that paradigm shift, and we have to think about how the church building itself stops taking precedence over our mission. And we need to think about how that building can be adjusted to meet the needs of our community rather than preserving it at the expense of our mission. And I think that's very much something that I've noticed happening, that the determination to preserve things as they've always been is getting in the way of our present day ministry and the mission that we've been given.
Wow, I think that's powerful. Couldn't have said it better myself as a pastor. 100% agree with that. We're coming near the end now. I was wondering, as the final question, throughout your 30 years, is there an experience that has left an impression, something that you feel successful in, or something positive that you've seen that you would like to share, that shows that the work that is doing is difficult, but there are some sort of success?
I would say that there are so many successful moments in your career, because there are times when the report you prepare has prevented someone from going to prison. But I think a story that I really want to share is somebody who I knew was into offending, had been addicted to drugs, and I did a lot to help and support that person over that time. You know, I went providing them with help, driving them here, taking them there, dropping them there, and trying to engage them in attending church. And I had thought that all of that effort was in vain. And because of the power of social media and Facebook, some years ago, I became friends with that person, not knowing that they had gone to church and had, committed themselves to Christ. And somebody else popped up on their Facebook page and said, I went to church today, and guess who I saw, who is now attending this church and a member of that church. And that was so amazing that I just couldn't stop jumping for joy, really, because maybe 20 years ago, when I'd been involved and supporting this person, it looked as though my efforts were in vain. And, 20 years later, this person was seen in church by somebody else, praising and worshiping their God. So that's powerful for me, because it says, and it tells me that no matter what you're doing, don't give up. You know, the word of God says, do not be weary in well doing, for in due season. So whatever it is we're doing, that we're doing unto the Lord, I would encourage everyone not to give up. That effort you're making, that person you're talking to, that person you're going out of your way for, that sister you're praying for, those children you're praying for, whoever it is, keep on praying, keep on believing, keep putting in that effort, because it is going to come back to where it needs to, which is to impact that person's life and lead them to Christ. So keep on going, keep on doing what you're doing for God's sake.
Wow, a wonderful way to wrap up the show. I think that's very profound. Antoinette, thank you so much. We've really appreciated you joining us and sharing with us. We're hopeful that we can utilize some of what you've said to inspire others who may be thinking to go along the same path. So thank you very much.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me. God bless you. Bye.
I want to thank you so much for joining us. As you can see, people like Antoinette make a difference. And so we're encouraging each and every one of you who may feel that this may be what God has placed on your heart, what your calling may be. You have come through the trenches and you want to help others do the same. What we're doing at the moment is we're set 3 tracks of training program. One for the mentorship track, one for traditional prison ministry, and one for aftercare, when those who have been inside prison are coming out and are facing the realities of the world. If you want to get involved, visit our website at whereisthechurch.co.uk and we will put you on one of those tracks. Thank you.